The journey of spiritual formation is a journey of change, of transformation through the guidance of the Holy Spirit. So let's grow some deep roots of faith and join together for the next 40 days of soul searching, transforming, life-giving work, responding to God's call and exploring our life of faith.
Welcome to Prince of Peace's Lenten experience. Today what we're going to talk about, I'm going to be doing 3 of these sessions. The first session that I'm doing with you here is about bound to free. First of all, I want to introduce myself. My name is John Reardon. I've been asked by your pastors to do the next 3 sessions with you. I'd like to let you know that I am the founder of a counseling and consulting practice that is in Minnetonka, and it's called Phoenix Process Consultants. I've worked as a teacher, I've worked as a minister, and I've also worked as a therapist. So that's what I bring to our work together. And I hope it will be work together, that you will treat this as a dialogue that we're going to have. I'd like to start with the whole question of transformation. Most of the time we think about things as being transformed outside ourselves, but transformation is really an inside process. So the things that you're going to be taking in and that you have been taking in are meant to help you transform yourself. And then when we go out into the world, we have a better chance of transforming things around us. It's very important work. So our work today is really basically to deal with the whole notion of bound to free. I know that Paula has mentioned the whole question of fear in previous conversations with you. I want to come back to that because, first of all, as an Adlerian psychologist, what I understand about us as humans is fear is innate in us. We trigger and receive and understand fear in a basic way through birth. So we're always going to have fear. It's just innate. And then our life is begins to be a thing of choosing. So in that fear, the idea here being, in that fear, are we going to be bound? Does it bind us or does it free us? And so today what we're going to start with is the whole question of fear. We have to start with this from the standpoint that we will have it, and we must understand it, and how is our fear triggered. That's really a first point of transformation, is understanding your own self in that way. I think the other thing I would like to say is I think that fear is also a blessing because it's an early warning system. It tells us that something's going on around us and that we must be watchful. Then the question would be, and that's the Adlerian question as well, is how am I going to use my fear? So what we have is I can use my fear to be bound, or I can use my fear to be free. This next thing I want to say is about freedom. I think our freedom is also inside of us, and that is a gift. The gift comes with, again, creation. So that's the first truth that we're exposed to in the scriptures in Genesis, is that we're created in the image and likeness of God. And in that creation, our worth is fixed. So also at that very point, we are given free will. I think sometimes when I think about that, I think that God is giving us free will because God knows that we must be free to love in return. And God wanting to be loved creates us and makes us free to do that or not to do that. It's a very big risk. So fear is a moment of choice. And I think, again, in keeping with the scriptures, the basic fundamental choice is either in our fear we're going to give life to others, or we may take life from others. And taking life may not be in the sense of death. It may be in the sense of those remarks that we make, the snarky things that we do with people, just the unkind things that we do. So the thing there is, again, if we line this up, that then we're free to give or to take life. That's our fundamental option. Now, when I was thinking about this, I was thinking, well, how do I bring this across in a good story? And the story really is and it comes from Luke, and it's the story of the Good Samaritan. Now, if you understand that story, Jesus is being tested by a Pharisee and being asked about, well, who is my neighbor? So that's how the story starts. And Jesus tells the story. And he says, well, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho. And on the way, he falls in trouble with robbers. And they beat him and take everything he's got. And they leave him in a really bad state by the side of the road. As the story goes on, the next person that appears in the story is a priest. The priest is traveling down the road, sees the man at the side in bad condition, bloodied, and the priest goes to the opposite side of the road and walks on. The next character to appear in the story is the Levite. The Levite is walking down the side of the road. He sees the man bloodied and in bad condition. He crosses the road and walks on. And then finally Jesus says, the Samaritan comes. And what we know now is Samaritans were considered to be second class. They were considered to be less than the Jews. So Jesus has picked the Samaritan. The Samaritan comes and sees him and is filled with empathy and compassion, and he picks the man up, cleans him up as much as he can, puts him on his donkey, and then takes him to an inn. And he says to the innkeeper, here, take care of him. I will come back and I will pay for everything that you've done. And it ends with Jesus saying, so, who is the neighbor? And the Pharisee has to say, well, the man who helped him. So what is it about? Why did the priest and the Levite go by the man? Because they have some rules and regulations about purity that are related to their role. And if they treat that man, then they've gone against those rules of purity. The Samaritan has nothing like that. All he has is mercy. And so, again, if we look at this, who is bound and who is free? And what is the basis for being bound and the basis for being free? So what we may think about is, sometimes are we bound by, if I do this, I won't look good? If I do this, I might get in trouble? If I do this, I might upset somebody? Or are we free to just make the human gesture? And I think that's the idea. The idea here being that, and this is, again is where psychology meets spirituality. Adler would say a good human being would be compelled to be merciful, to be compassionate, and to respond, to act. So I think that what I'd like you to do this week is I'd like to perhaps live with a question. And the question would be, how do I use my fear? First of all, how mindful are you of fear? But how do I use my fear? And then the second thing would be, do you find yourself, when you're in those fearful situations, prohibiting yourself from doing things? Or do you find yourself free to do them? So I hope you'll live with that question. And then next time we meet, I'm going to come back and ask you about that. So have a good session.